Alright, last but not least, let's talk about the build action. Now, the build action has various functions throughout the game. First, we should talk about the structure bonus. Every game is going to have a structure bonus. There's straight lines, neighboring lakes, neighboring tunnels, on tunnels, neighboring encounters. Trying to think if there's another one. I think there's another one, but it's not coming to me. Those are the 5 I can remember off the top of my head. Now, taking a look at that is going to be the first thing you want to do if you have a board that builds structures fairly well, notably if it builds structures better than it builds mechs, or if you have a start that builds structures better than it builds mechs with white or blue. So, what do structures do in the very early game? Well, with certain factions, such as blue and white, when you have a wood in your starting area, you're going to want to take a look, as we'll talk about in the faction videos, to see how much your build cost is. If it's 3 or less, and it's tied to either the produce, the trade, or the move action, you're going to want to get a mill. And this is the first thing you're going to want to do in your game. I know I talk about 5 workers and getting a mech online. I know I talk about enlisting sometimes with Crimea. But very first thing you're going to want to do, if you can do it, is get a building and get your mill. Getting a mill is going to get you a ton of resources in the early game. This is the best early game action to do if you can do it in the first 3 turns without taking a bolster action. Like if your build action is under your produce like it is here, say this costs 3 instead of 4. Like ignore that 4th wood for a second. Well, you could take a trade for 2 wood, right? Then we could take a produce, get a wood, get an oil, and then use that 3 wood to build. And we'll get a mill down on one of these 2 spaces, and then we move, and then we get our 2 or 3 produce actions to get up to 5 or 8 workers. And while we're getting up to 5 or 8 workers, we'd also be getting an extra resource every time, which is going to help power out whatever resource we so choose. So mill is the most powerful thing to do in the very, very early game. Other early game buildings. Well, there's a rule that I have that you need your speed mech for moving your workers, and you need either another mech to get your mobility, get your character off of your main island, get other things off of your main island for most other players, or you need a mine. A mine acts as a substitute for your second mech. If you're going for buildings, oftentimes you're going to want to get a mine down instead of a second mech, because it'll help you get to your star. And getting a mine down will allow you to get onto the board with your speed mech, no matter where your mine is. You can get out and onto the board. So this is the alternative early game to having a second mech, is having a building. What about your other buildings? Well, mid-game monuments are very, very powerful. Every board has their 3 coin action, if there is one, tied to bolster. Upgrading bolster power is significant for that reason early on, because you're going to be taking generally whatever's here multiple times. But also, getting a monument is even more important than upgrading your bolster power action for that sort of reason, because getting a popularity is almost always more important than getting an extra power. So getting 2 power and 1 popularity every time you take your bolster action to do whatever's on the bottom here is going to help your mid-game out significantly. What do I mean by mid-game? After you have 5 workers, after you have your speed mech, after you've moved your workers and picked up your first encounter, you have officially entered the mid-game. The mid-game is a round of productions, a round of taking as many bottom row actions as you can, and as many powerful ones as you can, which means that getting this monument on around that time is going to allow you to pick up 2 to 3 or even more popularity. Generally 2 to 3. Last and probably least is the Armory. The Armory is a mid-game building. If you can't get your mill up early, like very, very early, And then oftentimes you're going to be very close to the mid game. Your first building is going to be a mine then, if it's not a mill. You're going to get a mine down, and you're going to get a monument down. And you're going to have to think about your third building. Well, at the point where you're considering a third building, it's going to be around round 13-ish, maybe later, probably later, but around that sort of time, 13 to 17. And you're going to be almost done getting resources. You don't really need a mill anymore. That's the thing. So you get an armory. And if you need to trade for popularity or resources, you just incidentally start picking up combat power. It's certainly better than the mill if you can't get it super early, but it's not essential like the monument and the mine are for getting a 4-building game if it's a powerful action for you. Generally, if you didn't get your mill down very early, your mill is going to be your last building. It's just going to be there to get you an extra star. Alright, what else do we need to consider about buildings? Keep in mind that mills are still good until about round 10. Typically is when everybody should be in the mid game. If you can get your mill off in those first 9 rounds generally, it's still going to be good because you're still going to have 3 to 5 more produces depending. Which means it'll get you 3 to 5 extra resources, which could help smooth your game out, allow you to put on less workers wherever the mill is, and allow you to produce on extra tiles. But if you get past the stage where the mill is essential, you're going to want to get your monument out, and then you're going to want to get your armory out because it's pretty late, and then you're going to get your mill out last. So yeah, other than that, anything about buildings that you need to know? Try to get as many structure bonuses as you want, or as you can. Keep in mind, let's say you're not going for buildings. Keep in mind that your first building on every structure bonus gets you an extra 2 gold. So there are some times where I pick up an encounter that gets me wood, and I wasn't planning on building buildings that game. But it's like, do I want $2 and 1 popularity? Or do I want to give $2 for 4 wood? Well, that's basically just like getting 4 wood, right? Because spending the $2 is going to be negated by the fact that whatever my build action is, let's say it doesn't give me any coins at all here, it's going to get the first building, assuming I get no other buildings, is getting me an extra 2 coins at the end of the game. So keep that in mind. Your first building always gets you an extra 2. Assuming it fulfills some minor condition, which you can always basically do. Like if it's straight line. Sometimes if it's neighboring counters, and it can be a bit difficult because you can't build a structure on here and pick up the 2 extra because it's on an encounter, not neighboring. But with neighbor tunnels here, for instance, I would get 3 extra coins for building a building here if I got build a building as one of my encounter options. So just keep whatever structure bonus is available in mind when you pick up encounters. And that's really it for buildings. Again, a fairly easy one to get a star for, as you only need 4 buildings, and one that provides pretty significant advantages for you in a similar mannerism, but not quite as powerful mannerism as in the mid game. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed. That's the last bottom row action. I'm sure I'll be tying in my faction videos underneath these videos or as a part of a separate playlist. And I'll be talking about, well, think of something to talk about.